Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here, back with another look at the design journals for Chronicles of Elyria. It's been a while, almost a week in fact, but we are back, and I'm done with midterms, so I'm diving back into the design journals. Today we're looking at number 14, which is all about player housing, architecture, and construction. This is one part of the game that I like the idea of, but I think they could have implemented better. Obviously, they still have time to change how they're going to implement it, but I definitely have a couple bones to pick with this system here. Not so much the system, but the certain aspects of the system, I guess. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. As always, I'll kind of read through and give you my opinions or some extra tidbits as we kind of get through the content. So people say home is where the heart is, and while that's true, it's so much more than that. Home is where you spend your childhood, where you host and eat dinner with friends and relatives, where you play games, practice your trade or craft, and where you raise your family. Home is your safe haven. It's where you keep your treasured keepsakes, favorite paintings, and your grandmother's rocking chair. In short, your home is an extension of you. Unfortunately, most other MMOs forget that fact and either skip player housing altogether or overlook the many mechanics that can be tied into player housing. So in this week's design journal, we're going to be talking about player housing and architecture in Chronicles of Elyria and the many game mechanics they tie into. We'll talk about when and where you can place your buildings, how buildings provide player benefit, how buildings interact with their environment, and how the very flexible building system allows you to create just the right home and other buildings for you. So just right off the bat, I really like that they're tying in player housing into all sorts of things rather than it just being somewhere to kind of like leave your crap, just to kind of decorate around. Skyrim was sort of like that until they released the Hearthfire DLC. Prior to that, it was basically just a house that you bought, and it gave you somewhere to dump all your loot so you weren't carrying it around. And, you could move stuff around and decorate it. But other than that, you really couldn't do much. Hearthfire obviously changed that slightly. You could adopt children. You could build all kinds of crafting facilities and sort of re-situate the houses that you built on your homesteads slightly differently. So yeah, I do like what they're going for with this system, but as I said, there's a couple things I wish they would tweak. So here we've got a screenshot of a house, pretty cool looking. I mean, not much to say here. It's pre-alpha, so this is all placeholder stuff anyways, but it does look good. Again, the lighting looks great. You can see it kind of shining in through the window pane here. There's a soft little glow there, and you can see the light on the floor. And then, yeah, you can see the light reflecting off that shield there from the torch, or is that a candle? I think it's a candle. So, housing. One of the first questions we get asked when we tell people there's player housing in Chronicles of Elyria is whether we've got instanced or open world housing. When we first thought about which system to use, we observed so many more advantages to open world housing that it wasn't much of a decision, really. I tend to agree with that 100%. I think instanced housing really hurts immersion, especially if you're going for like an open world type setting. There's plenty of buildings scattered around your average landscape. There's no reason why players can't live in most of them or make use of most of them. To begin with, in systems with instanced housing, it's common for players to use pre-existing, pre-placed homes. However, there's so many opportunities for customizing the exterior of the houses, the materials used, the landscaping, etc., that we didn't want to pass up that opportunity. You guys can see this. No, you can't, at least not the bottom of it, so let's scroll down. Another problem with instanced housing is there generally isn't a way to interact with the with the outside world while inside your house. We really wanted people to be able to move in and out of homes quickly and easily without having to go into loading screens. This is true whether you're coming out onto the balcony to rain arrows down on invaders in the streets, or if you're an assassin sneaking into a window to assassinate a king. I agree with that 100%. I think that, especially with instanced housing, where you've got to load into the building, it's basically taking you out of the world. And in an open world game, sorry about that. So as I was saying, in an open world game, you should never be taking the player out of the world and into another one, because then why have an open world? You're jumping around between separate worlds. You're effectively gone from that world once you're in your house, and safe for the most part, unless there's some way for people to break in. But yeah, I agree with that 100%. I really like that aspect of it. So also, Chronicles of Elyria sports a fully destructible environment. We didn't want... Oh, as Chronicles of Elyria sports a fully destructible environment. We didn't want the destruction of one building to result in the destruction of many instanced homes that all map to a single physical building. Again, that is pretty important. Also, kind of tie back into what they said before, if your house can get destroyed, it would kind of suck if you didn't really know it was happening until you had like your little instant cell collapse in around you. So finally, we use the same system of housing to build both homes as well as shops, smithies, auction houses, and other forms of buildings. With an instance system, you'd have to remember which instance you wanted when entering a building and use the button on the wall like an elevator. This way, you always know precisely where the blacksmith is on the map. Yeah, again, I agree 100%. I think this is absolutely the way to go. And like they said, there really wasn't a choice here if you want to build an authentic open world game. So, dimensions, and not like other dimensions, like the physical properties of something. Now that we've established houses and other buildings take up physical space in the world, the next question we get asked is how big can buildings be? The short answer is it depends. The maximum size of a building is determined by the availability of resources, the type of terrain you're building on, and what technology is available for construction. Initially, it may only be possible to build 1 or 2 story homes. However, with enough wealth, the right technology, and the right terrain, it's possible to build massive castles or keeps with multiple floors, large wide open areas, dozens of rooms, courtyards, and other architectural features. It's even possible to build bridges between 2 adjacent homes in order to combine them into larger structures. So we've got another screenshot here, just more interior decorating. Again, the lighting looks great. The placeholder stuff, maybe not so much, but it's placeholder stuff and there's nothing to worry about. I'm sure all of the art assets will get overhauled before the game releases, probably even before the beta comes out. But yeah, it looks great, especially for pre-alpha. Not much else to read into that. So, building placement. The next logical question is, where can I build? It's not uncommon for games to limit construction to within specialized housing regions. In Chronicles of Elyria, you can build pretty much anywhere. Awesome. So, the world of Chronicles of Elyria, or the world of Elyria, is divided up into sections of land called parcels. These parcels are 64 meters by 64 meters and can be further divided up into zones. It's possible right from the get-go to construct a building on any parcel of land or zone that you own or lease with permission to build. As we'll talk about in a future design journal, it's even possible to construct buildings on land you don't own. If you can defend your new structure for long enough, adverse possession, you may even take ownership of the land, so sort of like squatters' rights or something to that effect. Aside from those restrictions, you can construct buildings pretty much anywhere in the world where the terrain is suitable. If there are obstructions in your way like trees or rocks, you can remove them via mining or logging. So that's really cool, especially on like frontier areas where, in some MMOs, even if you were technically in like a frontier, you would have to buy the land. But in Chronicles of Elyria, you can, go out and explore. And if you're the first person to sit down and settle on that land and you defend your homestead, then it's yours. You don't have to buy it from anybody because there's no legal authority there yet. It's a frontier. So again, immersion, realism, and it just makes sense. I love it. So foundations. Oop, a little bit too far there. In those rare instances where the land isn't immediately suitable for construction, it's sometimes possible to work around it. For example, if the land is uneven, it can be flattened by laying down a foundation. Building a foundation acts as a sort of terraforming, raising up the land where necessary to create a nice flat space for construction. In areas with shallow water such as bogs, beaches, etc., stilts can be used in order to raise the base of the building up out of the water. It's even possible to mount large platforms to the side of massive trees in order to build light structures on top of the platforms. That's right, tree houses. So, not much to take away from there. You can obviously adjust your building to whatever sort of terrain that you have to deal with. Tree houses are awesome, especially for people who are playing as sort of they're not elves, but they're elf-like humans that live in the forest. You can have, a tree city would be totally awesome. I would absolutely love to see that in the game. I don't know that I'd want to necessarily live in it, because I feel like I would be the one to fall out of it, but Yeah, I think that's really cool. So housing mechanics. As I mentioned at the beginning of the design journal, far too often MMORPGs take for granted all the great mechanics housing can be used for. So now that we've talked a bit about where you can build, let's talk a bit more about why you'd want to build. Housing in Chronicles of Elyria is designed to address several different design mechanics, including survival. As discussed in previous design journals, Elyria is a dangerous place and players have a powerful need to survive. While inside of your home, the typical survival mechanics such as hunger, thirst, temperature, and personal safety become far less important. It's assumed, as long as you're in your home and your town has supplies, that you're not going to die of either hunger or thirst. So, just reading into that a little bit, I think that also means that if you are in like a frontier area, that safety may not necessarily apply, because if you're not part of a settled town or village, they probably don't have supplies. So unless your little homestead does, you're probably not going to reap the same benefits, but who knows. So furthermore, while resting in your house, your energy levels will stabilize, preventing you from getting further fatigued. Finally, assuming your home is built with the correct materials, there's little risk of hyper or hypothermia while inside the comfort of your house, regardless of the outside temperatures. Worst case scenario, you can always light a fire in your fireplace. So you could potentially freeze to death if you don't build a proper house in a cold area, or maybe, die of like heat exhaustion if you don't build a proper house in the desert, for example. You have like, I don't know, just like a really heavy stone house that traps all the heat and is basically a giant kiln or something. So we got another screenshot here. Let's take a look. There's the fireplace with a painting, and behind the painting there is a safe. That's pretty cool. So you can hide your valuables behind the paintings and stuff. And fire to keep you warm. That's all fine and dandy. Storage. That's probably one of the more important things about housing. As a survival RPG, Chronicles of Elyria has extremely limited inventory. Basically, if something isn't in someone's backpack and it's not visible on their person, they aren't carrying it. Given that, players need a safe place to stow their unused equipment, their treasures, and their trophies. Your house, business, or warehouse is an ideal place for storing such items, but as we'll talk about next week, it may still be a good idea to store some items in locked chests or even hidden safes, as we saw in that previous screenshot. Crafting. Good old crafting. Plan to do plenty of that myself. Crafting in Chronicles of Elyria, like in many other RPGs, is done with the use of crafting stations, depending on whether you want these stations to be publicly accessible or private, and whether you want your buildings to be viewed as a residence or a shop. It can be a great place to put your crafting station. Why does that matter? There are no specific building patterns in Chronicles of Elyria for things like smithy, lumber mill, warehouse, inn, or shop. Only patterns for floors, walls, etc. Then there are also patterns for different types of important furniture such as anvils, looms, writing desks, bars, mayoral desks, judicial stands, etc., all used in various professions. In the end, rules about what can exist in the same space or in different spaces dictates what a room is: bedroom, living room, workroom, etc., and what type of building it is. So if you want to create a bedroom, simply create a room with a bed in it. What to make a public want to make a public blacksmith, make a publicly accessible room and throw an anvil and forge in it. I don't know. I think that using or making your workstations public could be dangerous. People may abuse them or damage them, especially if that's how you're earning your livelihood in this game. I mean, obviously you're not going to like starve to death in real life because somebody broke your anvil in Chronicles of Elyria, but obviously there's things to consider before like building a public smithy. But obviously that's going to vary depending on who you are and what you're doing. So customization, personalization, and secondary benefits. Inside of houses there will be tons of different types of furniture like dressers, beds, changing and crafting stations, bookshelves, kitchen tables, ovens, fireplaces, furnaces, etc. Each of which provide additional benefits to the home as a whole or to the people residing within it. In addition to the different types of furniture in the house, there may be smaller or more cosmetic items such as pictures, rugs, sculptures, coats of arms, and other things to keep on the mantle. In nearly all cases, the items can be crafted by artisans of the correct profession, and in some cases, those additional novelties can provide additional benefits while you're in the home. such as inspiration when performing certain crafting skills. That's pretty cool. A little bit of a use for everything, even the decorations. That's always nice. Gives you a reason to do it rather than just having a very sparse, bare home because you don't care about the decorations so much. There's actually some benefit to doing that, at least to a small extent. You guys can see this one, so I won't scroll down yet. As we'll talk about more in later design journals, maintaining one's status as a vassal or nobility is a demanding job that often leads to socializing and entertaining others at your residence. If you want to work your way up in the social class, be prepared to play the Dance of Dynasties. So obviously the people with the bigger, nicer homes who throw parties all the time are going to be a little bit more popular among the nobility and will probably rise up through the ranks better than those with the smaller, less attractive looking homes. So it's something to consider as well, especially if you want to play the Dance of Dynasties as they call it, or get involved in sort of like the Game of Thrones-esque politics, all the cloak and dagger stuff going on. Family system. Finally, and perhaps the most important mechanic thus far, is the role housing plays in the family system. The phrase noble house comes not just from the family's name, but also their physical place of residence. In Chronicles of Elyria, your social status, wealth, and the size of your family is closely connected to your home. For example, as part of the process of having children, it's necessary to have allocated a private space for your new child. In most cases, this means a bedroom in your house. In other words, the number of children you have is capped by the number of rooms in your home. The wealthier and larger your house, the more noble your house. So, again, going back to Skyrim, like I always do, the best comparison I can see for this is sort of like in Hearthfire. If you guys have played the Hearthfire DLC, you couldn't adopt a child until you had a child's bed and a chest in front of it. So if your home didn't have those built yet, you couldn't adopt a child. And this is sort of similar. You have to have like a bedroom for them. Or, I mean, you could have a bedroom that houses several of them, probably. But you do need to have space for them. You can't just be having all these children and sticking them all in your living room or something. Although maybe you could if you got creative with your decoration. But yeah, we've got another screenshot here. Again, the lighting just looks great. It's I think they said they're using CryEngine. And, CryEngine is obviously one of the better engines out there currently. But yeah, the lighting looks great. Textures are a little bit low res, but pre-alpha stuff looks just fine to me. Architecture. Right. So up until this point, we've been talking about where you can place houses and other buildings and why you'd want to. Whew, excuse me. I'm recording this at like 2 a.m. after work, so please excuse my yawn. Now, let's talk about how. Chronicles of Elyria uses a hybrid housing system that grants maximum freedom and creativity to those who want to have an interest in architecture, while simplifying the construction and placement process for those that just want to get their houses built. Similar to I'm just having a hell of a time right now. Similar to the way contracts work, we've created a division of responsibility between those who design houses and those who create them. To make this possible, Chronicles of Elyria implements a blueprint mechanism, which architects create blueprints, and then builders use the blueprints in order to construct the building. So you can literally just be an architect in this game and make blueprints for things and sell them to construction companies or people looking to build homes, and just make your living that way. You just draw blueprints. Or like they also mentioned, you could just be like construction workers if that's what you want to do. You could be like medieval construction workers and just build stone buildings for a living. Architects. We get a little peek of the building system in the bottom of the screen there. Housing in Chronicles of Elyria is fully customizable, but it's the architect that creates the blueprint for a building. As a result, virtually any shape and size of building can be built within the skill of the architect. The process of creating a blueprint is done using the architecture tool. This tool, much like the map tool, allows you to draw content directly onto a blueprint. However, as blueprints are inherently more 3D than maps, we've created a special 3D environment for architects in which you are quite literally transported into the blueprint to help you visualize it. So that's pretty cool. We'll actually be providing a standalone version of the architecture tool next spring so people can get their hands on it early and see what it feels like to design buildings in Chronicles of Elyria. As this design journal is a bit dated, I believe they're referring to spring, as in like right now, sometime around March, April, May. So we could be expecting that fairly soon. I know they're talking about a playable alpha or beta in the very near future as well, or they were. So as player-created content is paramount to the success of Chronicles of Elyria and isn't part of our business model, the tool will be made freely available to everybody. That's really cool. Let's take a look at it. So we've got this. I can't see all of it. That sucks. So let's zoom out so you guys can see the whole thing. We've got the actual blueprint here. Structures, stairs, roofs, and portals. So all the different things there. Obviously, this is going to do the walls. The stairs will take you from one level to the next. The roof will cap the building. And the portals, such as doors and windows, will create openings for it. And then we've got all these different shapes here. My biggest issue with this, and this is sort of what I was talking about before, is everything is very, very inorganic, at least the way it's shaped. So while later through the technology progression, that would sort of make sense. Obviously, a lot of houses now are very square looking, very square and triangular. But initially, if you go back to Vikings and like early medieval and even before that, while some of the larger structures were very ornate and inorganic looking, the houses or hovels that people lived in were basically like a pile of rocks with some hay across the top. So I would like to see some more organic looking structures, especially for the early game, because they were saying that the technology level at the start of the game is going to be about Bronze Age. So you can figure like ancient Greece, for example, was about Bronze Age. So obviously I think the buildings should reflect that better. They should be very rough and rustic looking, and so far I haven't really seen any of that. Everything has looked very late medieval. But again, we've only seen pre-alpha stuff, so I'm not super concerned about it. That's just one concern or little nitpick that I've had with the architecture system, and that's what I was talking about before. So there's my minute of griping. Let's get back to the design journal. When working within the architecture tool, the skill of the architect will determine several things, such as how many floors can be in a building, how complex the shape, 4 walls, 5, 10 or more, and what materials can be used. In construction, the material you use... Whoops, I forgot to go back to this so I can see what you guys can see. The material you use is important, as a material's weight and strength are used in combination to determine when or where you need support structures and how strong your structure will be. For example, if you're using wooden flooring on a second floor, there will be a maximum area before a first floor support structure will be necessary. Switching to reinforced materials can change the requirements. So it's sort of like building, like if you were, I don't know what's going on with my phone right now. I thought I silenced it. So if you were building like supports out of like stone columns versus like steel beams, obviously the structure would be much sturdier with one compared to the other. So where were we? As you're working with the architecture tool, the UI will make you aware whenever the creation of a structure would be inherently unstable. Of course, the architecture tool can only calculate the physics based on what's known at design time. Things in environment can add further complexity. So, sort of think of it as like if you've ever played Ark, it'll only let you build flooring so far before you have to have like a support. Yeah, I mean that's the best comparison I can think of. Obviously, so if you could build like 2 tiles in any direction before you need a support with wood, but if you did like steel, you could do like 4 in any direction or something. That's basically as simple as I can express that. So builders in construction. Constructing a house is an active process in which crafters of all walks of life work together to create the individual components of the house and then combine them during the appropriate point in construction in order to slowly build up the final product. Because construction is modular, components within the blueprint can generally be replaced with higher or lower quality components. For example, if you've got a wall piece, the pattern may call for a wooden frame. In this case, a frame can be made out of virtually any wood. However, the pattern may also call for a wood of a specific hardness or strength. In this case, it'll be necessary to find a wood of the correct hardness in order to complete the design. If you do choose a different type of wood, the type of material you select may affect things such as how well the house keeps out heat, how well it holds out moisture, and how it responds to strong winds. So obviously that comes into play in like the desert or somewhere very cold. You probably want to choose materials that work very well in your environment versus materials that just look nice. But obviously, hopefully, there are enough material choices to where you can kind of combine those two aspects. You can find something very aesthetically pleasing that also has an added function of making you a little bit more comfortable in that environment. If you do choose to use a different type of wood, the type of material you select, I already said that. In addition to the framing materials called for, many other aspects of the pattern using construction can be specified at build time. For example, the floor may just call for any type of flooring. In this case, virtually any floor can be used, be it wood, tile, or even marble. As there are many different components that go into the construction of a building, there are many different skills that come into play. These can include carpentry, masonry, glass blowing, metalworking, etc. Because there are so many different skills involved in the construction of a house, it's impractical, though still possible, for a house to be built by a single person. When you take into account how large houses or other structures can be, combined with the time it takes to build each component, it becomes clear that such construction is really designed for a group of people to do in parallel. And we've got a screenshot here. Before we look at it, I just want to kind of expand on that last little point. So you can definitely build a house yourself. The size of the house and the detail reflected in the house is probably going to vary pretty considerably when you build it yourself versus having a team of experienced builders build one for you. But if you're out, in the middle of nowhere and you decide this is where you want to settle, there's no reason why you couldn't throw together some little stone and thatch structure and make that your house, and you could dig out a basement and have 2 floors. Or if you were a little bit more technically inclined, I guess, you might be able to add like a second floor onto it, or at least build some kind of loft within there. But yeah, you can do these things by yourself. It's just going to severely limit the possibilities, and also it might take you a little bit longer, or considerably longer. So here we have the next screenshot. You can see here with the interior, and obviously there's the exterior as well. Walls, floors, ceilings, and you can change different patterns. They have several here. They look like little Photoshop tile samples, but yeah, you can apply those to your stuff. And we have the exterior down here, which you guys can't see, so let's go back out. And you have sort of the same thing here, but we have walls, roofs, landscaping, and portals, sort of the same ones we saw before on the other blueprint. And then we've got some sliders here. This looks like a paint roller, so I imagine it would be something to do with color, maybe? I'm not sure. We have a hammer here. I'm not entirely sure at all what that does. And then this I can't really make out. It's cutting it off on my screen, unfortunately. So I don't know. Again, I'm just speculating, so even if I could tell what it was, I don't know necessarily what it would do. But obviously there's some sliders you can adjust to further customize your patterns that you choose. Okay, environment. And we're starting to run a little bit long. Hopefully this design journal is nearing the end. While we want players to be able to control the look and feel of their houses to a degree, we also want the housing to make sense in the part of the region the player is building in. As a result, the look and feel of a home in Chronicles of Elyria is largely driven by the types of materials you use. Wooden siding comes with a different look and style than other siding. Plaster, tar, metal, etc. Roofing also brings with it a different feeling. Furthermore, the environment and biome has the biggest impact on the type of resources and the style of architecture most suitable. Some materials will handle heat transfer better, some are better suited for arid environments or high humidity. Some soils will allow for tall, heavier structures, some will not. Some materials are suitable for fast, strong winds, while others are meant for calmer weather. So this is really important, and it may not seem like it, but what they're doing here is they're differentiating the different biomes in the game by more than just weather. So now if you're going to live in that biome, you actually have to build a house that is going to work in that biome, and the appearance of that house is going to reflect that. So when you go to a certain area, the architecture there is going to look different than a different area. And so that's really important, because if you have all these different biomes and everything looks the same within them, why have all these different biomes? It doesn't make sense. And so this is going to expand on that further, and I think it's a really, really good idea. So upkeep and updates. If you're building in an area and use the correct materials, you'll find there's little to no upkeep involved in maintaining your house. But if you use the wrong material, you may find your home deteriorates over time via rust, mold, cracking, and other negative effects. If this does occur, your best bet is to replace components in your house with more suitable materials. That's right, even after construction is complete, it's possible to select some components in your house, destroy them, salvaging some materials, and then replace them with higher quality components. It's also possible to add on to existing houses after construction is complete. So just like we saw with the crafting system, you've got a sword, you can go back, pull the blade off, put a new blade on, change the hilt out, maybe pop out the stone in the hilt, and replace it with a different stone or leave it out. Same thing here. It's a little bit more limited because obviously there's certain things that would destroy the structure if you replace them or tried to take them out. But yeah, you can still go back and make tweaks to things just like you could in the weapon crafting system. Okay, so as we talked about earlier, your family size is tied to the number of rooms in your house. It's only natural then to build onto the side of your house as your family grows. So your house expands as your family expands. And here we can see some building, 2 stories. I do like the two-tiered look. So at the bottom, let me zoom in so you guys can see a little bit better. So at the bottom here, you can see that it's made out of like a heavy stone, and up at the top it looks more like a plaster. So you've got the very heavy stone walls at the base to kind of support the house, and then up top you've got the very light plaster walls, because they're just supporting the weight of the roof, not the second floor like the bottom floor is. So what's next? In this week's design journal, we took a look at how housing, architecture, and construction works in Chronicles of Elyria. Next week we're going to dig deeper by taking a look at how zoning, ownership, and transference works, and what you can do to protect the valuables you store in your house. Oh, and we're going to talk about other structures that can be built, such as subterranean structures and dungeons. Awesome. We'll close out next week's discussion on sieging and building destruction, even better. Don't miss next week's design journal, and we will not. I'll have it up as soon as I can. But for now, we're out of time, so as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you guys want to get involved in the Chronicles of Elyria community, you can follow the link below. It'd be very kind of you if you use my referral link, but any and all interest in Chronicles of Elyria helps get the word out. So, if you like the game, feel free to support it. And I will see you guys back here for Design Journal number 15.